Om Satchena Labhyastapasa Hyesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sadirehi Jyotirmayo Hi Shubhraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible self within all beings, in all things, is realized by knowledge, by moderation, by austerity, and by veracity, all of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities are dissolved due to this practice, then the seer gets into meditation, and he sees the Atman everywhere, abiding in everything, even here, in this very mind and body. Om peace, peace, peace. O te gyan yoga nugata apasyan, devatma shaktim sagunayar nagudim, yaha karanani nikilani tani, kalatma yuktanya adidishtatyekaha. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Practicing the yoga of meditation, the ancient seers of India beheld the divine Shakti, the divine energy existing in everything, which, though veiled by her own modes of nature, was nevertheless one and indivisible, and which had been incomprehensible to them earlier due to the limitation of their own intellects. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome to SRV Hawaii, the Big Island, where we are broadcasting, live streaming to our audience and to those devotees of the Great Master and Holy Mother who are here with us today in our new shrine room and classroom, which is, if you cannot tell by looking live stream, maybe you can tell by the sound, which is much more live now, and has that ambiance and that echo to it. But we are here in a much larger space, which we're grateful to have received and expanded out into in our new center here in Big Island. If you want to take a little view, a little tour around, we will pan for you so you can see some of the divine images. We've set it up basically to be a universal shrine room with a center around, of course, our Ishtam, Sri Ramakrishna, and Swami Vivekananda, who are the paragon of universal harmony and tolerance, not just even tolerance, but deeper understanding of the unity of all religions. Not that all religions are the same by any means, but that they have the same essence behind them. And so in that regard, to accompany the sentiments of universality and to also accommodate all beings and their different temperaments. We've included here images of Lord Jesus and Lord Buddha and Sri Krishna, and then of course Sri Ramakrishna and his 16 direct disciples. And we have Lord Shiva represented by our Shiva Lingam, and side altars also that are hosting and holding the direct disciples, both male and female, of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and our gurus are also here on these altars. And some of what you can't see around you by a mere pan of a camera is also many images to Madame Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of fire and lava, and many other things too that she signifies in this wonderful land of Hawaii, which we're fortunate to live in. So you are able to take in at least a little bit of the feeling and depth of the beauty of this shrine room, which we've spent several weeks expanding out into from our old shrine room next door. And we will give our first class here on the second of a series of meditation called the seventh limb of yoga. That's called Dhyan Yoga, of course. I just chanted Te Dhyan Yoga Nugata Upashan, that the ancient seers of India practiced the yoga of meditation, Dhyan Yoga, and thereby came to know, and it was revealed to them that there was a divine mother energy, Shakti it was called, that was existing in everything, behind everything and running through everything, like sweetness in sugarcane juice, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. So that divine energy, one and indivisible, is often veiled by her various modes. That is, she's veiled by her own Maya, which is an interesting teaching. So if it's difficult for us to behold the Lord and the Mother of the Universe in their essential forms, their formless forms, you might say, then we have to then come to know that all things are manifestations or expressions of that formless nature, which they epitomize. And in that way, then, we're able to practice seeing God in everything, is the way we say it in Vedanta, and as well as practicing looking through the appearances of things. Both of those things have to go rather simultaneous in our practice. Sort of like fencing with two swords, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. The expert fencer will fence with two, like the masters of swordplay. And that way he means that basically we're going to have to practice seeing this, all of nature and people and planets, and both external and internal, because there are worlds inside, kingdoms of heaven within too. We have to practice seeing these as manifestation of the divine. At the same time, Vedanta declares that name and form and time and space and causation, another word for karma, are veils, false superimpositions, or upadis, or koshas, over that formless reality. And so our practice as Vedantas is to meditate and see through the appearances of things. At the same time, we're holding this ideal that all of this is Brahman. It's one of the dichotomies or conundrums of spiritual life that is actually a good nut to crack, or a good way to cut your teeth, spiritually speaking, as they say, because you come upon these apparent contradictions all the time. Is God there? Is God not there? I feel God, yet I can't see God. And God is in the experience, but is also the experiencer. And God is everything I see, but I also have to be the seer in order to see it correctly. There's all these wrestling that you have to do with manas, that is the mental complex. The mental complex is mind, manas, and then chitta, its thoughts. the thoughts, the mind stuff, sometimes they call it, the stuff of the mind. And buddhi, intelligence or intellect. And then also this ahamkara, called ego. So mind, thought, intellect, and ego are the fourfold mind. It's called antahakarana in Sanskrit. It means the inner cause of everything. Antaha is inner, and karana means cause. So they named it appropriately to reflect the fact that if all of this is mind made manifest. Objects, worlds, everything you see, with everything you experience with your senses, because the five senses are connected to the sixth sense called the mind. And without the mind there, of course, the senses won't function. And there's also an intermediary between the mind and senses called prana, which is a flow of energy that's causing your eye to see and allowing your ears to hear what I'm saying right now. So all of these things form a practice for us, and it's very close to what we have been studying last week, Sunday for 3 hours, and what we will study this week for 3 hours, and also next week at the same time for 3 hours. So 9 hours of looking into the seventh limb of yoga, called Dhyan Yoga. So practicing that yoga meditation, they cut time down and they cut space away. They crushed the stars to atoms, as sometimes Vivekananda used to say. And then they saw through name and form. That is, the names of things, so many different languages, and saw through all of the assignments that the mind will make on physical objects, all sorts of physical objects. And then they also took away the form, because they had to see through the limitation of form. Like the five sheaths, body, mind, and energy, and intellect, and ego are all called five upadhis, or coverings over consciousness. So if you put those coverings on, consciousness then all of a sudden is limited, and it's limited just to five senses and what the mind is able to think. Sometimes the mind gets into habitual rounds of thinking and doesn't go very deep or very high, sometimes even downright low. Sri Ramakrishna used to say the mind sometimes runs so low as it's like rainwater seeking the lowest place to settle. So the mind can be that heavy and brooding and depressed and so forth, as we know from watching the world. But the mind can also, if you get a hold of this upward moving energy, this upward moving prana, can also be elevated and place itself on deeper subjects. Well, we call those subjects, a good overall or coverall word would be dharma. In Vedanta, probably more specifically, jnanam or atma jnanam. Jnanam is, of course, a specialized knowledge, probably better called wisdom. And it's not just secular knowledge or intellectual knowledge only, or even worldly knowledge. Those three fall below it. But higher than those are higher wisdom, jnanam. And then, if you want to say atma jnanam, you're talking about not just a knowledge of teachings which we give and contemplate, keeps our mind high, but actually coming down to the essence of knowledge, which is your Atman, your true nature, which is nameless, formless, timeless, deathless, birthless, causeless. So taking name and form out of the quotient, and then time and space out of the quotient, then you come down to this final aspect of the fivefold Maya called causation. Causation, of course, isn't like in physics, just what happens when you move an object or when two objects collide, or movement of bodies around a physical space, but it's also has to do in Vedanta and in Indian spirituality with the way the mind thinks and what are the ramifications of that. If you follow the ideology of I think, therefore I am, by Descartes, then you would follow that mode. I think, therefore I act, and And those two combination give me a sense of who I am and what I do each day. But Vedanta turns that around and says, I am first, and therefore I think. So people who think deeper begin not to think at all. And they discover that if there's name and form, then there should be namelessness and formlessness. And if there's time and space, then there should be timelessness and spacelessness. Like deep sleep last night, you all went into a nameless, formless, timeless, spaceless condition. Everyone did, unless you didn't have the benefit of deep sleep last night and you dreamed all night. Gaudapada calls that poor fellow a fool. See, a nervous wreck who doesn't get deep sleep every night and have that kind of rest and reflection of no forms, no names, no time, no space, no considerations, no money, no children, no worries, no heaviness, no gunas to speak of, no individual consciousness thinking I feel good now and I feel lousy now later, you see, and vice versa. Just completely into a neutral space, if you will. Of course, and that's not even the highest level of consciousness according to Vedanta. Beyond deep sleep is Turiya, the fourth or samadhi level. And that's what meditation is leading to. And so I said last week, that I wanted to look at meditation first as that which preceded it. That is, you have to, if we looked at the 8 limbs of yoga, you needed to get your yamas and niyamas together, be nonviolent and truthful, and do some austerity, as we just chanted, and do some deep practice, and find out where your obstacles are. Vikshepas or antarayas, they're called. And do away with those via practice. Do away with the impingements and infringements of Maya, see, that are there if you allow them to be, and push through those and get them behind you. Get thee behind me, as Christ said about those things. And once that's done, then you're set up for being able to successfully detach from objects. That's going to be a combination of pratyahara, like pranayama and pratyahara. Pranayama means I've controlled my energy now through my breath and so forth, and I can sit and I can be still and peaceful. Now I put my mind into a state of detachment. Before, when I didn't have that control, I was grasping selfishly at things. I was taking things to myself. I was dependent upon things. Somebody wrote me last night a letter, one of my students said, I've come to know that I should not be dependent on anything or anyone in this world. That's my understanding now. This person is a professor in college, see. So they need to completely detach themselves from dependence on all things that let you down in the end. Objects, personalities, activities, and be that stationary, that steady in the self. And so that would be one of the predecessors to the seventh limb of yoga, would be this pratyahara, being able to successfully detach for whatever reasons is necessary at the time. If I'm too attached, or if I want to be not have to rely upon anything or anyone and anywhere at any time, then I would want to practice that extreme detachment. Detachment actually has 12 levels in Vedanta, all the way up to para-vairagya. So there's a middling, low and meek vairagya, they call it. And then there's a middling or madhya levels of vairagya. And then there's some very high and extreme levels of vairagyam, detachment. And so if you wanted to take the fifth limb of yoga and put it side by side with Vedanta, then side by side you'd see one says pratyahara and the other one says vairagyam. So you're going to want to practice that detachment as an aspirant for truth, so that you find yourself not depending upon anyone or anything. You can rest in yourself. The peace that passes all understanding begins there. And you don't have to venture out anymore or depend upon anything exterior. You begin to depend more on the interior worlds. And no man hath seen God with these eyes, then you want to see God with the inner vision. And so you're going to have to open up that inner vision, if thine eye be single. And if you can do that, then you'll get some view of the light which lies behind all of these appearances. Te Dhyan Yoga Nugata Upashan. They practiced yoga and they saw the Devatma Shaktim Svagunayar Nagudam, which was behind or supporting but also transcendent of the three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. That is this heaviness, this restlessness, and this balance, pleasant balance, you can call it. She was supporting those gunas, but also transcendent of them. So they practiced meditation and saw, took away appearances and saw that in everything at one point. So they would have had to have mastered some detachment, pratyahara, fifth limb of yoga, and then gotten into concentration, dharana. And if they could concentrate then, and they held that concentration for a long enough period of time, then they could begin to see the Devatma Shaktim in everything. They wouldn't just see a flowering bush anymore and say, oh, that's pretty, you see. Or just watch a sunset, oh, how marvelous. Or look at that tree, or the difference of this and that, and so forth. They would actually be seeing the divine energy in those things, as these all-supporting substratum, as Patanjali calls it in yoga, the substratum. And that would tend to, if you saw it, release you from dependence upon external things, because now you see that there's something that's behind the form that's not the form, something that's behind the space that it occupies, but it's not the space that it occupies, something that's behind the name and the form, but is not the name and the form which it takes on when it enters relativity. And finally, right down to the fifth element of Maya I was just talking about, that basically cause and effect are not desirable anymore. You don't want to be at the beck and call of cause and effect anymore. I go to this place, I do something, I hurt my knee, I suffer, you see. So I don't want to be under the sway of cause and effect anymore, so I might as well stay in one place and be silent and be quiet and know the truth, and the truth will then set me free. If I have to sit under a tree for a week or 40 days or whatever, or go into the wilderness for 40 days, then I'll do that in order to find that peace that passes all understanding. So these are the requisites to meditation, the seventh limb, is that you would have to get your act together, you see. You're getting your act together in Vedanta is I wasn't going to go here first, but you might as well. Right here. Getting your act together in yoga, then, before this meditation or seventh limb came about, you would want to master these yamas and niyamas. Those yamas and niyamas are, if you can see there, on those roots of the tree, from the inside out. First, ahimsa. You'd want to make sure you're nonviolent in thought, word, and deed. Try not to cause harm to anyone or anything. Of course, if you saw something and left it in its own nature, left it to itself and its own devices, and like say the Jains would not go and and mess with that lake, you see, or cut down that forest, or own that piece of property, see. Much like our Hawaiians here who had their lands taken away. They would not want to do that. You see, they want to leave everything in its own nature. A lot of the indigenous peoples understand that, whereas the materialists don't. Those who are seeking mammon, as Jesus said, instead of the Lord. So those who are seeking the Lord get peace, want peace, and those who are seeking mammon, they want power, and they get power. That's how my teacher put it. You remember our class series a couple months ago called My Guru's Teachings. We took some of his quotes. See, those who seek God get peace, and those who seek mammon get power. See, seek nature and the powers of nature, they get this power. So ahimsa, non-violence, would predicate and demand, really, if you took a vow about it, that you would not trouble things, you would not rearrange things to your own liking, and make changes that were unwise, that would unsettle things. If you unsettle things, you're unsettling your mind, because your mind is preoccupied with them. And when they get unsettled, then nature comes along and resettles them, and Maya then resettles both of those, and your mind gets unsettled. Then, unfortunately, you don't know that it all came from your mind in the first place, or you wouldn't have ventured out in that direction. You would have just let it be, let it alone. So nonviolence has other connotations to it than just, oh, I should not kill, thou shalt not kill. Because the Vedantis knows that you cannot kill. It's not that you should not kill. That's a moral law. But that you cannot kill is the truth of things, because nothing was ever born. So it cannot be killed. It cannot die. Everything is eternal. Everything is eternal. You, of course, your true nature is you, your soul, Brahman, or Almighty Father, Buddha nature, however you'd like to call it, is also eternal. Nature is eternal. And Maya is also eternal. It's just that nature and Maya are going in cycles all the time. And if you see these cycles, you might want to get off that merry-go-round and get rid of that dizziness that happens when you go in cycles, and get a clear mind. Make some clear mind soup, maybe, and treat yourself to a different perspective. Get peace of mind. So all of this, just to say that to get your act together for meditation means ahimsa is going to be necessary. You look around, very few people have a meditation practice, but they do have a practice of violence. They violate everything. You see, the natural laws of nature, the laws of relationships, and the laws of their own personality. They're constantly in some sort of discord, you see, rather than accord. We want to be in accord, you see. Let's strike an accord. You see, that was an old saying. And if you did that, then you were able to take the first step towards a non-violent stance, which would be non-violent to everything: trees, animals, insects, certainly people. I mean, if you want to go and kill animals and insects by deforestation and meat eating, well, at least stop there and don't kill people. That should at least be your first stance, your first step towards nonviolent. But better to take it as a vow overall and move about the world without causing any aggression and aggravation and undue competition. In fact, maybe it might even be better to follow up ahimsa with selfless service of other beings. See where you can go to help them rather than to disturb them. See where you can go to help them grow rather than to change them based upon what you think they should be doing or not be doing. So a meditation practice, very rare, but if you want to sit in meditation and you want it to be successful, seventh limb, then all the way back here at the first limb is the very first requisite for it, called nonviolence. How can you be in meditation when your mind is agitated? In any sort of way. Even if you keep that violence to yourself. Say, oh, I'm really churning inside here, but I'm not going to hurt anyone. That's not good enough. See, because this will get out of control eventually. So, to control it really in Vedanta is to destroy it at its root. These are roots, see. So you want to go to deeper roots than, in fact, there's a beautiful saying in the Advaita Gita, I am beyond roots and I'm beyond rootlessness. I am beyond the smoke of Maya, I'm beyond the smokelessness or veillessness of Maya. There's a whole non-dual way of understanding things which is shocking to the mind. You thought I was doing good and I was growing and I was making things better and so forth, I was making progress, to come to find out that none of that was true. It wasn't untrue either, because truth and untrue is another problem. So real nonviolence would just be this absolute neutrality, transparency. Your consciousness would be in a homogeneous state all the time. And it wouldn't be reactive or reacting to things that happened in the world of phenomena, in relativity. So this is a very peaceful stance. To say nonviolence would, you see, it's why it's a yama. It's why it's a prerequisite practice, or maybe call it an observance, because it doesn't make sense to say the word nonviolent. You can't do violence to anything, because there's nothing here to do violence to. This karma that comes off of doing the act is what you're suffering. And so that's really more for the eighth limb of yoga, what I'm saying. Sorry to jump so high. That's samadhi you're talking about. But talking about the requisite to that is meditation and dhyan. And then dharana was a requisite to that. So down here at these first steps, ahimsa is one of them, and you'd want to go then on to practice truthfulness. You'd want to practice non-coveting of other people's goods. Not only other people, but other countries would be a good thing to say here. You're trying to go and help them increase and propitiate and work for the concrescence of the good of humanity, not to detract and diminish and compartmentalize and restrict, you see. But it's all a matter of concrescence. So that's important. And you want to then be moderate in all your sensual appetites, and also give up holding things and giving things. That's called a parigraha. If you looked at these 5 yogas through Patanjali's lens, then about ahimsa he says, if you practice nonviolence, the result of it is all hostilities from all quarters cease. So I know I've been a vegetarian for 45 years and I've practiced nonviolence very serious and so forth. So when I go outside into my garden and there are wild animals, they'll come to me. Maybe not right away, they still have this fear of memories of other treatment from other human beings, like a dog that's been beaten or something. But they see you just going about your natural way of business, and you haven't harmed them or haven't thought of harming them for a long time. They'll walk up to you. Sheep, goats, chickens, cows. Pretty soon they're right there with you, you see. You can pet them, talk to them. So That's what he means. All hostilities cease when this nonviolence is practiced. Like, for instance, dove lighting on Jesus' shoulder, a lion passing by Swami Vivekananda when he was meditating, not harming him. See, snakes slithering across the lap. Those are things that are just free of fear, basically. It's there, the fear in that party and the fear in this party. You see, the fear in this party has to go away, and then the fear in that party will then follow. You see, it will also diminish, and then there will be an accord. In music we have chords, you see, these beautiful chords that we use. So there's plenty of accord here. Namrichorna Shanka Namijati Beda Pitanaiva Menaiva Matama Janmaha Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. Well, sorry there was only 2 chords there. But that's an accord or 2. So we want to get into that peaceful accord. All of these strings are ringing in accord with one another because they've been tuned together. And the instrument has been set up so that it will afford that accord and cause harmony and vibrations that go out that are peaceful and healthy for the amelioration of all beings. Those are beautiful words in English: concrescence, amelioration. Why aren't we hearing them more in our language? We're hearing battles and rage and anger and war, terrorism, things like that, you see. They're going against the law, natural laws of both the universe and the law of spirituality, the Dharma, against them. And so you want to keep yourself as a supporter of the Dharma, never as its neglector and never as its enemy. And then things will go well with you. So Patanjali says about that all enmities cease, all hostilities cease. About truthfulness, he says, when firmly established in truth, all actions and their fruits depend solely upon the yogi or yogini. So if you're firmly established in truth, then you pretty much dictate the rest of your life. It all depends upon you then. See, the circumstances. Before it was co-opted from you by Maya, and Maya was throwing back the results of your karma at you all the time, and you couldn't figure out where it was coming from and why it was coming to you. You know the way I say it, right? The mantra of the worldly person, the bound person, is why me? The mantra of the spiritual aspirant is, who am I? And the mantra of the realized soul is, I am. So take your pick. Which mantra do you want to use? Do you want to keep saying, why me all the time? Why me? Why me? Or do you want to take a step forward and say, who am I? What is all of this? Where has it come from? And how has it proceeded? And when you find out it's all within you and it's come from within you, then you can finally settle and say, I am. I am that, or Tat Tvamasi, that thou art. You can sing that too. Put it into music or into poetry or into scripture like the rishis did, and memorize it and chant it. And that's also on here. Svadhyaya is another one of these roots. So about asteya, he says, mastery of non-stealing ensures possessions of all treasures for you. That is, if you give up stealing, everything will come to you. It's the actual coveting, asteya, and the stealing that is keeping things from naturally being yours. Everything came out of your mind as projection and turned into objects later via the 5 senses and the prana and the 5 elements. And that all came from you. Now you have to realize that, and when you realize that, you'll realize that all knowledge lies within you, or the kingdoms of heaven are within you, however you want to say that. So Patanjali is making these observances about the results of these roots of the tree of yoga, which are setting you up for higher limbs. Particularly that one called meditation we're headed towards. About brahmacharya or continence, he says, with continence comes the advent of strength and capacity. So if you want to be strong and you want to expand yourself, then you practice moderation or outright celibacy if you're a monk. For the householders, it's moderation of all sensual appetites. And for ascetics and monastics, they would completely renounce those things, externally and internally. But for the householder, it's the inward. She needs to be purified. Then the outward will be okay. Aparigraha, via non-receiving and non-indulgence, the yogi perceives memory and mastery of his past births. That's an esoteric teaching. Most people say giving and receiving of gifts has to do with greed and strings attached and all that. That's how we would commonly interpret such a sloka. But Patanjali gives you a deeper reason for practicing non-receiving and non-indulgence. Isn't rather like pratyahara, right? Don't involve yourself in these things. Certainly if you have something, don't say, I own it. Oh, it's an object there sitting next to me. I don't know what it is. In fact, you can't really know the object because it's a mass of swirling particles, so I should leave it alone on all levels. Yeah, you see. So my teacher used to say those things, and say, so I object to objects. Because their very presence is a danger. I'm going to start coveting it. I might get attached to it, could fall over and hurt me. See, there's plenty of them flying around in an earthquake. All sorts of reasons why you might want to distance yourself from objects. But the mental ones are the main ones. Since, again, everything has come out of you, from the eternal subject came the infernal objects. See? So since all the infernal objects came from the eternal subject, you want to make sure that you distance yourself from them once they're out here in physical form, because that's what will cause you suffering. Suffering and pleasure are the same thing. In fact, suffering will wake you up from your predicament quicker than pleasure will. So he gives us a deeper clue there. Perceives that memory and mastery of his past births. You see, so right away he sees through this fable, this myth, this lie they've been telling, or been these subtler truths that they've been overlooking, that there's only one lifetime. You see, you've had many lifetimes. You could probably remember it quicker if you've lived it more recently. If you haven't come back for a long time, then it's more unlikely that you're going to remember. But if you have a series of lifetimes, one after the other, it's also equally as likely that you can recall them. If you've been in a different body within the last 100 or 150 years, in a certain culture with certain parents and certain ancestors. So all of that needs to be studied. Ancestors and levels of consciousness. We looked at that when we looked at this chart last week. I just put it up there again so that we can make a segue from it. But you're supposed to meditate on these things. Flowers, earth, people, ancestors. Whatever it is, you meditate on them. You don't just take them for granted. Oh, look at what a world is out here. I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it's going, and I'm just following around jolly for the ride, you see. But I never know that it came from me, and I never stop to think about objects individually and what they are and what they're made of, until some scientist came along and invented an electron microscope. But long before that physical level of understanding came, all the way back to Lord Buddha and before, they were thinking about objects as being projections of the mind, vibrations basically. Vibrations at different levels that cohese the 5 elements into a solid thing. before it cohesed them, they were just thoughts in your mind. So you thought about them, you brought them together, and they cohesed into a world with objects. And in a deep sleep at night, they just disperse again. See, so you're always bringing things in and out of manifestation. Just like your breath is going in, holding, going out, holding, and that's happening all the time too, and you're not aware of it. It's the same with the world. It's being projected by 7-8 billion people every second. Just like their breath is going in and out of their body. And that's holding a world, holding a station of consciousness, and it solidifies, and then people buy into it, and they can't get out of it. They accept it to be the reality, when the reality is deep within them in a formless state. Always formless. Peace, bliss, Sat Chit Ananda, the indivisible level of things. That is, again, like that Devatma Shakti, imbued with sweetness and pervasiveness, like sugar cane juices with sweetness. He says about non-receiving of gifts then that if you give up having commerce with the world like that, then you'll immediately remember your past births. If I could put it for you in an easier way of saying, because you're so involved in the world, you're not remembering who you are. The world is keeping you thinking that you're someone else. It's called an ego or a family and my desires. All of those things are in the way because of your continual commerce with the world, name and form, and time and space. And everyone's in on that game with you, in this sort of myth that they're living. Only the person who stands detached in meditation from all of those things can all of a sudden catch his breath and all of a sudden see the stationary self underlying it all, which is all-pervasive and stationary and eternal too. On the other side, you have these 5 niyamas. All of these are setting you up for the 7th limb eventually. Before you even master the 7th limb, you'll be returning to these. In fact, isn't it here how Patanjali said it? The yamas, let's see, as much principles as they are practices. The wise adept and preceptor who sees the role and import of ongoing sadhana, that's spiritual practice, in the full recognition and realization of non-dualism, masters the 10 yamas, niyamas, perceiving them as eternal axioms. He then carries them along the precipitous ascent to that loftiness and unseen height of the 8-limbed yoga called asampragyata. I want to show that to you here in a minute. This asampragyata level is we're headed for after meditation is asampragyata or samadhi. So, import here that I was referred to this quote is that he perceives these as eternal axioms. They started out just as observances and practices, 5 of each. But then when he had his roots of his tree, he got up to the limbs, he realized those roots are keeping me floating here, are keeping me grounded. I can float in midair in the highest reaches of my own consciousness if I have those roots deep in the soil of awareness, in the soil of divine reality. So don't think that you will give peacefulness up, or give truthfulness up, or give non-covetousness up, or give non-gift giving up. When you have those mastered, as Patanjali is saying here, then those will be with you forever. He says here, the yamas are great universal vows to be practiced at all levels of yoga, not to be delimited by conditions such as species, locus, time, or situation. So whatever changes in Maya are there, the locale or the circumstances embracing, those five yamas are to be sacrosanct and held in you, and they'll give you your foundation for yoga. About the niyamas, he says, when imbalanced mind and negative thoughts present themselves, one should encounter them by impressing upon oneself the positive qualities of the niyamas of yoga. So when you've mastered the yamas and you're going out and you're being peaceful and you're trying to tell the truth and you're going to work where there are violent people and people who are not telling the truth, then you're going to have to rely on these. And these have been your vow, he said, right? He said, these are your vows. So you realize these and you keep them. And then you go out and you try and test them in the world and you find out that other people are not practicing those vows. They're not necessarily nonviolent or truthful, or they are coveting the goods of others. They're supporting governments that do and so forth. So all of a sudden you're following the beat of a different drummer, as they say. So when that happens, then he'd want you to have these for your meditation, because all of life is a meditation. As we were just saying about this chart, you're supposed to be meditating on everything, including your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states, and all the things that you did during the day, so that you can dissolve them at night. What does the yogi do with the mental projections? He just dissolves them all back, like bubbles into water at the end of the day, says the Advaita Gita. So your practice is dissolution all the time. Chidananda Rupaha, I'm Shiva, I'm Shiva. Does that mean I'm some four-armed god somewhere and I should be proud of it, or I should be worried about committing blasphemy for saying I'm Shiva or something? No. It means that you should be practicing what Shiva epitomizes. That's dissolving everything on the spot the minute it happens to you. And that's detachment. That's acid-like, immediate detachment. It's the non-reactivity that yoga talks about. But you're not waiting for 2 hours or till your evening meditation or to tomorrow or to next year or to next lifetime to get rid of it. You're doing it on the spot all the time. I am the fire that destroys the fire of practice, spiritual practice. That's Ashtavakra Samhita. I am the fire that destroys the fire of spiritual practice. So you're saying, well, I'll practice this later, I'll dissolve that later. Tonight in my meditation. Well, good for you if you happen to have an evening meditation and you're keeping to it. That's good, that's second best. But why don't you just become the flame? That like Swami Vivekananda, that anything that comes to you immediately was dissolved in his presence. Like a shining sun knows no darkness. So that's how immediate your so-called practice can be. So then that's why he wants you to look deeply into the niyamas to set yourself up for dhyan yoga, for meditation. They are tapas. Talk about fire. There's no more effective way of destroying impurities and returning yourself to your natural state of consciousness than by practicing austerity. And people don't want to do that because it takes effort. It takes time, it takes effort, and it burns. The word tapas is associated with words like fire and burning and sweating. See, austerities, those words, those are the ones, oh, I don't want to do that, thank you. I just want my pleasant little life, my gray little study of a life here, and whatever little tiny bits of peace I can eke out of it from day to day in the midst of the swirling activity of Maya. So then what I have to do is practice tapas. He says, via austerities there is freedom from impurities and mastery over the body and senses. Those three have not been mastered yet. You see, those three are coming up. Just in case you're not following me quite in that statement, and I hope they are on different different stands here. Not only are we getting color charts now from SRV and its spiritual director, but we're also having two views, you see. So there's the limbs of yoga, and what I was just saying about practicing tapas and mastering the body and senses happens right there after the yamas and niyamas are attained. There it is, body and senses, posture, breathing, and sense control. So he's pretty much preparing you for this by telling you this. See, if you can purify your senses via austerity before you have to try and practice the third and fourth limb of yoga, then you're far ahead of everyone else. You have a hand up, as they say. And there'll always be something that you can raise yourself by yourself. And then you won't have to then all of a sudden say, I practiced the yamas, niyamas, now I've got here and I can't go any further. See, I can't sit still, so my posture isn't mastered. I can't sit still for even 10 minutes or 5 minutes or a minute. What to speak of an hour or under a bo tree for 49 days. So I need to take my mind completely off my body as if it's an unclean thing. Because it is, isn't it? Have you dissected a body lately? Well, you start with a frog. But all physical things have these subject to decay and old age and death and so forth. Even when they're vibrant and living, they're not all that pure and clean, are they? So a clean body would be a washed body, but an interior clean body would be the mind. As your subtle body has to be clean. If your subtle body's clean, then your outer body will be clean. That's why they give you the mantra. People used to think, oh, we got mantras from the Rinpoches, we got mantras from the Swamis, we got mantras from this and that teacher from different walks of Eastern life, and so that means we're pure now. But they were giving you the mantra just to give you a pure body. The mantra purifies your body first, because then you can go in front of holy company. The holy company will drive you away if you don't have a mantra, clean body. So you get a mantra, you get a clean body. Then later it works on a clean mind. You have to use it though. If you get some poor foolish guru to give you a mantra ahead of time, then you've tricked him, you see, into giving you a clean body, and then you can go amongst holy company, you see. But so you've hedged a little bit there, but don't come to believe that your mind is going to get purified until you use that mantra and drive it deep into the subconscious, and it does its cleaning work then, you see. Has to be utilized that way and repeated over and over in order to do its work. That's what mantra is, repetition of the Lord's name. And it's not mentioned but once or twice in yoga, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. But he does mention it as being one of the chief practices. So mastery over body and senses will come about by tapas. Mantra is an austerity you do. It's a rather pleasant austerity, if you can look at it that way. It's not very taxing. It's not physically taxing. Not say like breathing, that can make you sweat and perspire, but mantra won't make you sweat and perspire. See? Maybe your eyes might perspire a little if you have love for God. And then you might weep some tears of purity, and that will cleanse the heart, as they say in many songs of India. But so these kinds of things are brought up by the father of yoga and also by the father of Vedanta, Vedavyas. Swadhyaya is study of scriptures. I mentioned it just a few minutes ago. He says, deities, sages, and adepts show themselves to that one who is inclined towards Swadhyaya. So, again, outside, you'll be able to recognize holy people and go to them. But what he's also inferring here is that you'll be able to have inner company. See, the deities will show themselves to you. Say the deity of water or the deity of the sun. Of course, you're going to have to meditate upon them because they're veiled. You see, veiled by the limitations of what? Your own intellect. So when you move those limitations, you'll see God in the fire, and God in the wind, and God in that, and you'll have those communion. They call it darshan in my tradition, with the deities. So he says here, deities, sages, and adepts show themselves to the one who practices svadhyaya. Why is that? Why that be so? Svadhyaya is study of scriptures and their memorization, and chanting the slokas. So if you were to sit outside and call your neighbor's name over and over again, all of a sudden, one day you'd hear that. Who keeps calling my name? You see. So he'd come over, look over the fence, see why you want him so much, you see. So if you continually repeat the names of the Lord like that, then, or the deities, see, you want to have a vision, like Sri Ramakrishna wanted to have visions of different deities, and they came to him. He saw Mother Sita in a vision, he saw Hanuman in a vision, he saw Muhammad in a vision. So if you want to have communion with them, then you concentrate on them, you meditate upon them, and they reveal themselves to you, but not unless you know what to say. Svadhyaya is knowing what to say. And of course you're going to want to know what not to say. You have to give up low-grade mantras, like how's the weather? Say, oh Indra, thank you for coming and appearing before me. By the way, how's the weather in Indraloka today? No, it's not going to work. See? You have to have something profound to say. So can't you say, Om Bhadram Karnebihi Srinayamadevaha, please make my eyes see what is spiritual. Please make my ears hear what is noble and uplifting. If you had something like that to say to them, they'd immediately, this person has some substance and some depth. I think I'll have some communion with that person, do you see? Or with that being, with that Atman. Because they've been able to put aside their 5 sheaths and their limitations, their antarayas, their vikshepas, their 6 passions, their 8 fetters, and now they're more like who they should be. They're really acting more like who they are. And therefore, it's not only their body and senses that are pure, but their mind is becoming pure. I want to know that fellow, or that person, you see. So, Svadhyaya, of all 10 of these, is my favorite. You might have noticed by what I'm saying. If you were just to study scriptures and memorize them and recite them, and all the deities would come to you, you'd be fine. They'd tell you what to do. They'd tell you how to get rid of your violence. They'd tell you how to be more truthful. They'd tell you how to give up covetousness. They'd let you know you shouldn't be accepting and giving away gifts unthought. See? So go to the highest. See? I mean, we say, I just said they give you mantra. Usually in the old days you wouldn't get a mantra until you did all this other austerity. Oh, now you can have the mantra. But now they're like giving it away so quick. Why is that? Because there's no time for you. Have you looked around at what's happening? Did you look at the conditions of this particular world in this particular age, and what's afoot out there? It's not just the games afoot anymore. Hell's afoot. And so there's no time for you to practice austerities, to do hundreds of rituals like they did in India. So you're going to need a mantra quick. But what are you going to need on top of the mantra? You see, you're going to need this meditation practice. And so they give you an ishtam. See? Oh, the deities can come to me, I might have to work on that, but gee, maybe I can convince this foolish guru to give me an ishtam, you see. Here, I'll bestow upon you a mantra for Jesus or Buddha or Ramakrishna, and now take it and go. Not like a thief in the night, but use it, you see, for your own highest good. Redeem us both. make wisest use of your time in the body, and put some meaning in your life, and some justification in your questionable choice of taking on a human body, or any body here. And redeem it, you see. So mantra and ishtam, that's what they're giving you. It's a quick fix as far as spirituality is concerned. You see. It'd be much better if you earned it over time, and you had a great teacher right out the gate, and you started practicing when you were a kid. Oh, then you would get your act together early. You see. Probably got your act together in another life, and you were born nonviolent. Like you see people, wouldn't hurt a flea kind of people, you see. So, I'll try and leave the subject of swadhyaya for now. But there I already kind of broached the next one, didn't I? You see Ishvara Pranidhana. You have devotion to God with form. It's also missing in a lot of meditators. They think that they can just go to formless samadhi and poof, that's it, I'll give up this world, I'll transcend it. And their karmas are still rankling inside of them. And they're coming back in other lifetimes as meditators. Meditate maybe all their life, but never get samadhi. So the seventh limb is meditation, the eighth limb is samadhi. It's way up here in the reaches here. There's a bunch of subtle levels of samadhi you're going to have to attain, but first you're going to have to entertain them. First you entertain, then you attain. Entertain means, I think I'll entertain the thought that this samadhi happens to people because I saw it in Ramakrishna and I heard about it in Jesus and I heard it spoken of in Lord Buddha, so I should entertain the thought that this samadhi is there and maybe I should try and reach it. How about this samadhi of equanimity? Does that sound nice? Or the samadhi of wisdom, natural wisdom. That's good, isn't it? See? So these are all preliminary samadhis. And they come after meditation has been mastered to a certain degree. Meditation isn't fully mature yet, obviously, because you're not having the seedless samadhi. That's the sampragyata, which I'll show you in a minute. But they are coming as precursors. See, you are having these peaceful moments, you're having these blissful moments, you're having these wisdom moments, these insightful moments, maybe even periods. But then you're not having the formless ultimate samadhi yet of absolute bliss, absolute existence, and absolute wisdom, of the hailstone having already fallen in the ocean. It's not just getting absorbed, it's immersed. So there's these periods of absorption. I'll also show those to you in Buddhism. We'll look at today sometime in Buddhism. See, these absorptions are called the 4 stages of formlessness. But back here at the yamas, niyamas, where it's just saying that having an ideal in form is very helpful, see, very beneficial, and it will help you purify the mind and make it ready for formlessness, because formlessness is no joke. It can happen to you like it does in deep sleep tonight, and you don't fear it, and you don't understand it, and you don't remember it. But to get into deep sleep consciously, or to get into formlessness consciously, that's a whole different matter. It's going to depend on what condition your mind is, what guna is present at the moment of that experience dawns on you. Because, as you know and you've heard, there have been people who've had awakening to higher truths when they're not in a very good state of mind. And so they're going to have to deal with extra baggage, fear, doubt, remorse, disbelief after the fact. See, Whereas if the mind had have been in a fine and fettle shape when it first encountered it, it would have just been natural, sahaja samadhi. It would have been just a natural samadhi. That's true. That's right. I know that. Now, back to my life, you see. Like Chetana Samadhi. That's a samadhi where you have it and then you remember it after you come back to your normal state of consciousness. I mean, Sri Ramakrishna was having samadhis all the time. Some of them he wouldn't remember when he came back to his normal state of consciousness. So there's some samadhis that just don't stick. It's like snow on a wet road, you see. It's not mounting, see. There's no ice. It's just gone. It was just a passing experience. But some samadhis make that deep impression. So, eighth limb, but the seventh limb of meditation we're talking about is going to depend upon, very heartily and deeply upon, you're having a foundation. This is a root that goes probably deeper than all the rest. This is a root in which all the other 9 are attached to for life. Ishvara pranidhana. Ishvara is the highest form that man can comprehend. I'm paraphrasing Swami Vivekananda. Ishvara is the highest form of God that the human mind can possibly conceive of. So you can't go any deeper or higher than a vision of Jesus or Buddha or Ramakrishna. Whoever your Ishtam is. You've chosen the Ishtam, and you've chosen them after practice. It would not have revealed itself to you, him, her, Shiva Shakti, if you hadn't have done some practice to warrant that. Some mantra might have come to you. People are getting mantras like Cracker Jacks in a box now, without even having to earn them and without knowing what they mean, and not practicing them much at all, saying them once or twice and throwing it away like the prize in the Cracker Jacks box, you see. So if that's true, then what about being qualified for this gift that you've been given by a soul who practiced this mantra and was connected to a lineage that practiced it for thousands of years, possibly. So Ishvara is right there at the root of that mantra. He says about it, surrender to Ishvara leads directly to samadhi. Well, shut my mouth, because I can't say anything more, you see. So Santosha's 9th, pleasure in the world and in heaven can in no way compare to the pleasure of the end of craving. So you would think Santosha, you hear the word and you'd think yogic style, Vedantic style, your reasoning about it. Santosha, contentment is the word we usually choose for that, you see. But that's not what he's saying here. He's talking about the end of craving. And that heaven and earth cannot compare to the bliss of the end of craving. Isn't that nicely put? I mean, it's a unique way of putting a teaching to show you the way great illumined souls would think when they hear a word or want to hear a teaching from an illumined soul or share one with you, the way they're thinking about it. This is why my teacher, you'd ask him a question, he'd answer it, and it had nothing to do with the question you asked. He's constantly doing that to people. In satsang, sitting around, oh sir, what's this and that, when I heard this, I read that. He would just go off on some tangent. Immediately, as if he didn't even hear the question. And you puzzle about that. I say, is he really there? Or is he here to help me? And he didn't answer my question. I have to go away unanswered. Later you'd probably find out that it didn't matter, it was answered and you didn't know it. It never occurred to you again. But he was actually giving you some totally different angle of an answer on it. And that's just what this is like. See, you hear santosha, contentment, but then all of a sudden you hear Patanjali say, nothing can compare in either world, inner or outer, to the end of craving. Wait a minute, what's that have to do with santosha? Well, you were talking about the result of being content. He was talking about the death of ignorance. There was no discontent or content in his mind. He was just talking about the non-dual state of no ignorance to begin with. No birth, death, no practice needed. My teacher used to say, if we all knew who we are, if we all knew who we were, or the Atman, then we wouldn't need to do spiritual practices. All of this would be superfluous. So just hang out in the highest limb, fluttering in the breeze, showing our plumage. So that's what I have to say about Santosha. I prefer to just leave him say it, you see. The end of craving would be contentment. Saucha, purity brings out mental essence to ready the buddhi for seeing the self. So Saucha, of course, purity, one of the highest coveted things. I mean, here you don't want to covet other people's goods, but here you want to heavily covet this, you see. Purity. Give me purity of body, mind, senses, as we were talking about here. And then that will ready the buddhi. The buddhi is my intellect, see. And it's not been set free yet. It's still laboring under limitations, isn't it? Because I haven't seen the Devatma Shakti in everything because of the limitations of my own intellect. So strike those limitations away and take them off. All of a sudden, and do that by practice mental purification, and all of a sudden I can see myself again. Self, meet yourself. Thank you. Here, make a note to myself. Self, make sure to realize yourself. There's the great self and the small self. The great self is master of the small self. Who else would the self be? Who said that? Lord Buddha said it about the self, about the difference between Atman and Anatman. So let's not confuse his words, or over-philosophize, or try and posture and pretend that we know what Buddha nature is. Just realize it, like he did. And he did it, called himself Buddha. See? He was prepared, he was awakened. He was the buddhi in its finest state. Don't vex your mind with ideas of whether he believed in God or not. That's not going to be productive. He was the self in all. Last week I showed you the Manjushri's Namasangit, all the different selves that Buddha is. The self of thusness, the self of transparency, the self in all, the royal self of intellect, and so forth. We looked at all those. Well, the only other thing to say, and we've covered this chart pretty well, as one of the requisites to meditation, is what Vedavyas says. The father of Vedanta, commenting on the father of yoga's 8-limb system. Now, that's genius. He says, the yamas, niyamas, from non-violence onwards to saucha, should be practiced diligently for attenuating the kleshas. As a single hole in any part of a vessel causes a leak, so too does the neglect of any one of the yamas, niyamas, render them all impotent. So, they support each other. It's like 10 fibers of a rope, you see. If one of those start to burn, the rest can catch fire, and the rope is worthless again. So each one of those is sacrosanct and woven together in a certain way to make sure that you get into yoga and then can get into meditation and can then have samadhi. Now I have a chart also on the kleshas that uses the same images, but I instead brought you this Antaryaya's chart. I think we're running out of time though for the first half, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the Antarayas anyway, so I'll just tell you what they are in the remaining 5 minutes. It's Patanjali's teaching again. These are also going to clear the way for meditation for you. And the reason I'm going back to the earlier limbs of yoga is the point I've often made is that people are meditating, but they still have karmas, they still have samskaras, they still have issues, and maybe what they don't have is a contact with scripture, Svadhyaya, and a contact with Ishvara, God with form. Have I made that clear? Is that to meditate, you may have to have these connections that are missing in you, rather than just jump from the lowest step to the highest step, like Sri Krishna used to say, and not know what the inner steps are made of. You have to come to know that step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are made of the same consciousness as 1 and 8. And then you'll have all your doubts removed. And you'll come back and you'll help others as an adept teacher. Otherwise, you're a good high jumper. That's about all you can say for yourself. I tasted samadhi and fell, see, or something. Or here I am back in the body again, another lifetime, and I have to, like everyone else going to grade school and high school, I have to go back and practice meditation again. Why shouldn't I be a master of meditation in this lifetime and then never have to practice anything again? That's called a past master. And there are souls around who epitomize and evince this past masterhood. We don't have to doubt it. The belief is staring us in the face. So here are some of the antarayas that you would want to watch out for. This is the short list of Patanjali's most problematic. And they fall at the physical level first: disease, vyadhi, and sthana, heaviness, laziness, ambivalence. Those are the two he mentions right away at the physical level. At the mental level, he mentions shamshaya, pramada, alasya, and avirati. Avirati is sort of like uparati, opposite. Samshaya, though, is doubt, indecision. That dies hard. Pramada is carelessness and resistance. Alasya is idleness and stubbornness. This heaviness is of the mind, whereas the sthana was of the body and senses. But this is beginning to get toward the mental body. Avirati is immoderation or sensuality, incontinence, pretty much the opposite of brahmacharya that you wanted to practice when you encountered that fourth yama that we just talked about. There's only one real problem at the root of the intellect. That's false seeing. Your intellect, if that were removed, my point is, if you had the removement of Bhranti darshana, if you saw the delusion, the deluded way in which you're saying, all of this would disappear. So you can clear your mind and intellect, work on your mind and intellect, and all these problems of disease and everything will go away. Because your mind gets pure and the body came from the mind. So therefore purify the mind, all of a sudden the body is pure again. Sense is the same thing. So at the same time I'm talking about not jumping from the first step to the 8th step. I am talking about jumping to a higher step when you have these obstacles. Not the steps of yoga, you don't want to jump those. You can jump to a higher step here if you find out what's most pressing of concern in you. Find that one and do away with it. It's like having one big bubble and a bunch of little bubbles attached to it. Pop the big bubble and these are gone. Find out that one thing that's really weighing you down. It could be right there in Bhranti darshana, which is why you want to meditate on your mind and see what its problems are. Face them off, not run away from them. You must face them off and see them and then dissolve them. Take Shiva as your Ishtam and dissolve them. And do away with impositions, false impositions and misconceptions. It's basically the land of misconceptions here. And people living in delusions. Like, for instance, my religion is the only right religion. That's an outright lie. It's an outright myth. It's one of the greatest problems of the world that causes narrowness and war. Your statement should be rather like our bumper sticker out there in the hallway, you see. All religion, how do we say it?
All religion is indigenous.
All religion is indigenous to your spiritual health, you see. So you need to have that kind of attitude to do away with Bhranti Darshana. And there are other darshana, other Bhranti, forms of Bhranti or delusion that are clouding your mind. If you look inside, see them and do away with them. Turn the laser of scriptures, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, your Ishtam, and the death of craving, and all these yamas you practice, niyamas you practice, turn that on them and destroy it. And then be an integral yogi, be a synthesizer of yoga, and use all your tools against the end, to a positive end. Then the last two here are alabdha bhumikatva and anavastitattvani. I like the nice long Sanskrit words and all their implications. Each syllable has an implication, each letter has an implication. Inside each letter is mother wisdom, is intelligent particles flowing in each letter. That's her, hidden. She's veiled by the limitations of your own intellect. So here you have it. Get the intellect clear, and you would have spiritual realization. You would get rid of failure and limitation, and you would get rid of inability or stagnation or what they call backsliding. I can't make any forward progress. There's this brick on my tail. It's always pulling me back. And so those are two spiritual problems. He gives you 8 and 9 there. And then you see with these, they call them vikshepas or antarayas in yoga. A list of 9 of them over 4 levels of your being: physical, vital, or mental, intellectual, and spiritual. After the break then, we'll, using what we've learned so far about yoga, we'll go an entirely different way. And I want to show you how yoga looks at the 24 cosmic principles and how it wants you to reach a seedless state called asampragyata. So we'll do that after a 15-minute break. Om Hari Om. Aloha and welcome back to our first class in our new shrine room and classroom here at the Hawaii SRV Associations. And we've given our first hour and a half darshan and dharma class, and we welcome you back to the final hour. And I wanted to take us on a climb up the tree of yoga now that we've looked at the roots, and we see that they're all very healthy with no decay and anything untoward in them. They've actually gotten rid of even ideas of decay and variance and change and so forth when we practice them, like nonviolence and truthfulness and so forth. And coming to your teacher giving you the mantra and telling you about Ishvara. Actually, it's all very nicely put in some hymns we sing. Pranayamam pratyaharam nicha videka vicharam japya sameta samadhi vidanam kurva varanam mahadavadanam bhaja govindam mudhamate Samprapte sanahite kale nahi rakshati dukrin karine Bhaja Govinda. That beautiful hymn by Shankara. That is actually the 30th verse, and where he says, regulate the breath. There it is, fourth limb. Withdraw the senses from their objects, fifth limb, sense control, or pratyahara. Discriminate well constantly between the real and the unreal. That would be, of course, discrimination or viveka, or you could say even concentration on the real. And control the mind and senses with the recitation of the mantra. Perform these well with great care, he says. So, in the face of all these negativities that come up, call them vikshepas or antariyas or passions or fetters and root ignorance and things that we looked at in this past hour and a half together, we find out that there are these tools and these solutions that are workable, viable, and render yoga into a profound system that is far and above better than any other way of proceeding in life. The yogic lifestyle superior. And the only thing that could probably be better than it is what it leads to. Yoga as practice leads to yoga as union with your true nature. What Vedanta then kicks in, you might say, in Buddhism and so forth. Not as a practice or as a philosophy, but as a principle, a truth principle. So we want to make sure that we make these beautiful jumps from cosmology to philosophy, and then those two to spirituality, or you could even say from the outer to the inner to the transcendent. These beautiful triputis that come along for us. In the meantime, we always have to be very careful about proceeding. If we are careful about proceeding, then we do away with these negativities. Like, say, I just reminded of Kalas, what he sings. Nama japane kyun chordiya ramanam japane kyun chordiya rama Nama japane kyun chordiya Krodana chora Jyotana chora Krodana chora Jyotana chora Satavatane kyun chordiya rama Satavachane kyun chordiya rama Satavachane japane kyun chhod diya Ram naam japane kyun chhod diya Nama japane kyun chhod diya beautiful way in which this wonderful devotee of Ram sings the truth to all those who would listen to higher reason. He tells them that the mind should give up all these unnecessary preoccupations that it engages in and just sing the name of Ram. That's simply enough. Like the import of the mantra, as you're saying here. And renounce anger, deceit, and dishonesty, as Krishna says in the Gita. And don't give up your integrity. Keep your integrity, he says, and sacrifice everything for the love of truth. That's basically what he's saying in those beautiful 2 verses. And so in that way we find that yoga and Vedanta concur, and they might be seen from their steps of practice and attainment just to lead back to the natural consummation of oneness of the self. It's innate purity, it's intrinsic perfection. That's always what's been taught in Vedanta and in India, rather than original sin. It's not good to harp upon original sin. Both Sri Ramakrishna said that, and my guru said it often too, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj. Not good for a man to think about sin. Must think about his divine nature, and the Atman, or Paramatman. And so we try to convince the mind. He says, "Oh mind," he says, "don't. Why have you given up chanting the holy name and doing these practices?" He has to convince the mind, because the mind tends to fall out. See, it falls out in its practice of everyday consciousness. It falls out in meditation, falls out in dreaming and fantasizing, and falls out in school and in studies. So how to keep one steady mind? And of course you probably know where I'm leading with that, is that's the 6th limb since we've approached it. Posture and breathing, we've had enough about that, heard enough about it, and talked about it. If you want to put it simply, just ekasana, one position like this, and then breathing just natural, equal, in-breath, held breath, out-breath, and another held breath at the bottom, just a natural 3 or 4 method way of natural breathing and sitting. And then the mind will begin to calm down on its own. And one can then practice pratyahara and concentration. Pratyahara would be sense control, as we just sung. Shankara values it highly, and puts you into a state of concentration. Now all of these limbs are also very much described in yoga in a different way too. We have this image here of Patanjali, which is a beautiful one, and very much an in-depth teaching here, but the reason I'm showing it is that you can see it side by side with these Visheshas, Avisheshas, they're called, or 24 cosmic principles, as we've gotten used to seeing it in Samkhya Yoga. And we might as well, just for at least those in the room, or you could even remind people about that, is that when we looked at the dissolution of the mind stream chart last week, we saw that these various sets of 5s were there, all leading us back to the ocean of Brahman. And that's called involution. And then an evolution would lead you back through these very same principles, back to solid earth. Of course, this is happening every 24 hours. You're going in and dissolving everything back to the state tonight into formlessness, and you're coming out in the morning and coming back through all of these like lightning quick into the solid earth and the consciousness of people. So you're shifting consciousness, levels of consciousness, they say like that. Consciousness itself doesn't move. It's the support of all, and it's pervading everything, but the mind is shifting through it and using it as the substratum, and it's just appearing in different forms and in different states. And inside of any one given person, say, let's call that person a advanced meditator. In an advanced meditator, then they are shifting these stations and watching these principles and using these principles consciously. Here, it's like this. You see these final products of nature all the way back to the unmanifested state, and then back out. And when you look at them through the lens of yoga, you'll see that they're actually samadhis. It's sort of like saying to the beginner, why are you seeing this world as Maya? Why are you seeing all the problems here? And why are you harping and brooding and complaining and dragging your feet and resisting? Wasn't that all back here in the avisheshas, that antarayas and the vikshepas rather, that you wanted to get rid of those things? So if you had to concentrate on them and get rid of them, then fine, we wish you success with that, and you then should have arrived at something that was akin to this kind of understanding about samadhi and everything. I mean, there's the old cliche about just watching the flower bloom or meditating upon a flower or upon a sunrise. If it's just consciousness in the senses and it's just enjoying beauty, that's one thing. But if it's enjoying what's beyond beauty, called peace, then that's a better thing. But if it's enjoying what's beyond beauty and peace, called bliss, that's the best thing. So if you want to put it in terms of English words that cite qualities, from Vivekananda's poem, for instance, strike is wake up the note, the song that had its birth far off, which worldly taint could never reach, in mountain caves and glades of forest deep, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break, where rose the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. Sing high that note, sannyas both. So it's knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. So everything is a samadhi with a bliss behind it. And that bliss is, the more unalloyed it becomes, that is, the more consciousness is true to itself and is pure, innately pure, in realization of its innate purity, I should probably be saying, then the more unalloyed that bliss is. And so it's constant all the time. And the mind gets entirely absorbed and then leaves the realm of relativity and lives more and more in the absolute realm. And then it gets acclimatized to the absolute realm, and then when you see it again in a great being like, say, Swami Vivekananda and so forth, you're not actually seeing it in relativity anymore. You're seeing it as it rests in or abides in its own essence, called Atman. So what you didn't see there, what was going on there, was this spiritually alchemical transformation, as it were, till the soul got so acclimatized to its own inner essence that it just stayed there. It stuck. That's where snow will start sticking to the ground and become deep, pure, a mass of white light, if you will. And that's what we saw or have seen in these great beings. So all of this, though, skirts or overlooks the dynamics of what's going on. So we don't want to overlook those, we want to oversee them. And then you become the seer instead of attached to the seen. As Patanjali said early on, the problem with this day and age is that the seer has become attached to the seen. And if it becomes attached to the seen, then it loses its intelligence, its knowledge of being the projector of what is seen. And it goes out only. goes out only from its nature and stays out in the realm of the five elements. Or doesn't meditate upon its stations on earth. And when it leaves them, then it comes back to them, doesn't know them, and so fears them, and the fear and ignorance of them brings it back to these stations. So there you see Patanjali's description of this. He says, in the mind's move towards unification, it must meditate on the alambanas, the 24 states of matter, until it reaches the seedless samadhi. And that's a precious little clip of sutra out of yoga, of this eight-limbed yoga, called Astanga Yoga or Raja Yoga, or sometimes they call it eight-limbed, sometimes they call it six-limbed. Patanjala, also name it after its founder, Patanjali, so which is a great honor to have that system named after you. So there you see the first final products of nature, that if you were in the right state of mind, you would be in a kind of samadhi around them. 5 cognitive senses, hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, and smelling. 5 active senses, speaking, acting, moving, procreating, and excreting. The 5 gross elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And the fourfold mind, ego, intelligent thoughts, and mind. And that would also be fivefold if you put the Mahat in with it. That is cosmic mind. But of course it's going to occur at a deeper level. Those are what you've seen in the dissolving or dissolution of the mind stream. Those are pretty much the very same things with mind added in. Here's mind here, antakarana. So what's not figured in so much here is the mention of the prana, or the 5 forms of prana, which you see I've put here in this particular chart. Sorry if the going back and forth here for the live streaming audience, that maybe they can see these at a later date or can go back and look at these again. But pretty good to stay on this side of the fence, though, because this is called savitarka samadhi. It really means with objects. It's with manifestation, all manifestations. So it's concentration on the gross alambanas. So it's much like, sorry to show another chart, but for those of us here in the room, it's like showing this chart last week, where you're supposed to meditate on the senses and on the 5 elements, the body, the prana, and planets, and all sorts of things you're supposed to meditate upon. So in that way, you'll make connections like Mahachamasya did, as we saw last week. Discovered the 4th world beyond Bhurbhuvasvaha. So you'll discover more about these worlds inside of you, these worlds, kings of heaven, or these chambers of the Father's mansion, as you meditate on these things. What I'm saying here basically is that we were raised in the West and in this modern age not meditating on them. Our parents did not tell us to meditate on them. Did your parents ever say, go out there and meditate on that lake now? See, take this flower and go meditate on it. See, why are you roasting marshmallows? Meditate on that fire. See, so we never were taught this. This is the art of consciousness. And so we have practiced the art of unconsciousness. That's what's in us. We're unconscious beings. The yogis, yoginis, the seers are telling us that behind every appearance is this Devatma Shaktim, this divine conscious energy that is akin to your true self. It's actually identical with your true self. And if you had that, all of this would be blissful. Since you don't have it, all of this is a matter of pleasure and pain. That's a duality, see. If you had that, pleasure and pain would not be there for you anymore. You just have this constant samadhi, in this case, with solid objects. Savitarka. Nirvi savichara would turn into inner objects then. You'd have a samadhi of inner objects, which this would set you up for. But look at some of the facets of that. You must meditate on the nature and order of the origins of these things. Not just from the standpoint of science and biology and history and study of striations and lands and animals and fossils and so forth, but from the standpoint of where their true origin is. For instance, your soul was never created, so it didn't get formed by the earth. It formed the earth. It formed all planets. So your consciousness is at the root of everything, and everything came out of that. So you're going to have to turn that one on its other end. That lock turns in the opposite direction. So find a key and turn it in the opposite way you would usually think of things, and you'll put Maya aside and you'll see things as they really were, so that your consciousness is at the root of everything. So this is what I'm saying. We weren't taught that consciousness is. Sarvosmi, everything is conscious. And we're only thinking in terms of something that's sentient or insentient, or something that's more conscious or less conscious, like humans, animals, plants, insects, more conscious, less conscious. But none of those things are conscious in themselves. Consciousness with a capital C is in all of them equally, in both quality and quantity. But the vehicles are more refined, and the more refined they become, the more they can realize that consciousness. So my teacher used to say that light shines off a rock poorly and shines off a leaf better, shines off a lake better still, and a mirror best of all. Because a mirror doesn't have, like the mind mirror, doesn't have waves, and reflections, and fragmentations, and so forth, you see. So that one light is there shining on everything, but it's the vehicle that it's shining through or on or in is less able to reflect in its innate perfection, you could say, or in its entirety. So you say, from a fish to a dog to a human being, and then to a seer. See, these are the levels of consciousness that are more and more refined. The vehicles are more refined, and the mind is more refined. And as it becomes more refined, then it would be able to see the origins of everything inside of itself. So that's the first real big step there. You should meditate upon these gross things according to finding their origin inside of consciousness, not inside of nature. So we weren't taught that. We had to find the origins in nature only. Nature, which is not sentient, so how could it have really produced anything? And if it did produce anything, it took it billions of years to do so. But my consciousness can be aware of it right away. Or not. So I vote for consciousness over nature. You might have noticed. Meditate on them as they appear in your mind, in time, is the next thing. All of these things, these visheshas, final products of nature, meditate on them as they appear in your mind in time, and you'll have a kind of savitarka samadhi around that. You can take up your time just mulling that over. How it all appeared to me, and how it appears to me, and spend time doing that. Just like, say, you would spend time listening to a piece of music that you like or something. But now you're doing it with something that's of a solid nature that you don't have a connection with yet. That is, you haven't realized that that has been your own projection, and you're considering it to be separate from you, when it's really come out of your thought process. I'm sitting here, there's a rug there, the rug's separate from me, and I don't know that there's any connection between me and the rug. Because nature formed that, and then I don't really know who I am, who I'm calling me. But if I knew that the rug was thought rug, that was its origin, then I'd realize that it came out of my own mind, and the rug is all of a sudden one with with my mind, with my thought process. And it's the same with everything, and that's how you begin to get bliss out of it instead of happiness. A happiness that's going to be truncated or interrupted. You want uninterrupted communion with that rug. And you only have that if you know that it came out of your own mind, because if it came out of your own mind, it will never be destroyed. If it's sitting here on the floor, it can be burnt, can be ripped, can be stolen. And so you don't base your house, you don't build your house on sand, you build it on stone or bedrock. And that bedrock is in your thought process. And this is where we're actually heading towards a higher thing. Well, I don't want to go through all of these and take all the time on them, but see some of the other things there. You meditate on their positive and negative attributes. Like, oh, the rug is nice, but I don't like the pattern. It's soft, but I don't really like the pattern. I want a different pattern. See, so you meditate on whatever's negative and positive about it and take it to task. And that way you free yourself from it. Otherwise, you don't contemplate it, then it never gets clarified. You have doubts. Meditate on the effects that these things have on your psyche and on your emotions. This would be a big step for Westerners if they can meditate upon how they feel about these things with their emotions. How do I feel about speaking, hearing? What I hear, see, how that makes me feel. Why do I cry? Why do I weep? It's actually the beginning of the lines in the Advaita Gita from about 50 slokas in a row say, oh friend, why do you weep? Why do you cry? See? So you have to meditate upon that to destroy it, to dissolve it, and leave off your preoccupation with negative things and so forth, and get into samadhi around any given thing. Like, say, surfers have a samadhi in water. Skiers have a samadhi in the snow. See? But of course, we know you can drown and you can break an ankle or a leg in those things. So that's a temporary samadhi you're talking about. It's a pleasure-based samadhi. What we're talking about here is a knowledge-based samadhi. Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, and then finally getting to Sananda with bliss and to sense of self, the sense of I, Samadhi, which is getting very close to your true self. And finally, Siddha Samadhi. That's why I'm showing you this. This is pretty much 7th and 8th limb. When you've learned to concentrate here, and you already know why I brought this forward, so you can see the connections in these avisheshas, or in these principles called tattvas, depending on what system you're studying, that you get to concentration and meditation. You're talking about starting to have samadhis there. If you really have unbroken concentration, then you can have a samadhi, say, with math, or with science, or with music. Certainly, with music, I know that. So you're having these different kinds of samadhis with these secular subjects because you can concentrate on them. They're offering up their secrets to you. And your occupation with them is with interest. Where something else comes along, like doing my taxes, no, I have an interest in that, I think. I've never heard of an income tax samadhi yet. But I'm sure some accountants probably have it. So, but the kind of samadhi you want to have that's based in knowledge rather than in pleasure and pain, or aversion and attraction, because those are things you need to watch out for, are being described here by Father of Yoga. And in accordance with what you see, taste, touch, hear, smell, in accordance with what earth, air, fire, water, and ether, and in accordance with your mind, and the sixth sense, and how the senses are connected to it. It remakes your whole idea about life. Because now you find all of a sudden, if you practice yoga, that you start to get peace. Well, where did that peace come from? It came from understanding your universe. Not just from the standpoint of secular studies and pleasure and pain and money and gain and all the things that are possibly against the yamas and niyamas you were just practicing, ahimsa and non-covetousness, but it came from knowing them as connected to you. See, all of their knowledge is about knowing them as without the connection to them. You don't really have a connection with them except coveting them, or owning them, or enjoying them. So what's missing out of that connection is that they came out of you, a knowledge connection. We're not taught that way, you see, and we don't see things that way. If we did, then all of a sudden the whole world would be ours, and we wouldn't have to go dominate over other countries. Or, this is what the sannyasin and the avadhut and souls that are wandering around free are feeling all the time. This is all mine. And that freedom is there because they don't covet it, they don't own it, they're not violent against it. All the principles of yoga, everything is seen as pure, socha, and deep contentment, lack of craving, santosha is in them. So again, these yamas and niyamas then aren't just practices you did earlier that didn't, do anything for you. It was a phase you went through and you forgot them, but they're actually axioms that are there, the foundation of all of yoga. So pretty soon you want to meditate on the relationship between names, words, sounds, meanings, and objects. We talk about that in Tantra quite a bit. This last bullet point, is one of the bullet points here. On the relationship between names, words, sounds, meanings, and objects. We're not doing that either. These things exist separately, and we're not connecting them. What the name of it is, when I say the name, what the sound is, what the letters are of the sound, what they mean, and how I can say something and it'll form an object in my mind. If I think snow, all of a sudden don't you think a snow-capped mountain or something? How the connection in knowledge between all of these things is immediate in the mind. It may take a long time in the physical to come about. Like you could say, win the lottery, win the lottery, win the lottery, and $1 million is going to be a long time coming to you. Actually, $1 million's not enough nowadays for people, but how quickly these things materialize in the mind when you make the connection with them. And it all has to do with names, sounds, words, meanings, and objects. Tantra brings these together under the heading of Om, the word, see. And that's why next week we will probably look at this nine-step meditation on Om. See, that is a beautiful chart that Shankara gave us this great teaching on. So, in this way, objects and the sense of perception and the mind get more unified, is what he says here. And this way, they all get more unified. See, now you're beginning to consider them as a whole, rather than as just parts that never had a connection with one another. There's water over there, there's fire, But they have a connection, and because you've meditated on their origins, you know that water came from fire and water came from air, and air, fire, and water came from ether. And this isn't just somebody sitting down writing a book in a college on physics or something. It's a connection that's been made in your mind, so you know all the 5 elements came from you. They're in God's mind. Ultimately, they're in the Mahat. You see, there's the individual buddhi, but then there's the Mahat, the universal intelligence. So you're tracing a trail inwardly towards a source. You're following a trail of breadcrumbs, like I used to say. And if it hasn't been pecked by the little birds of forgetfulness, then you'll find your way to the Mahat, to the great mind, and you'll establish your connection there with it. And the kinds of samadhi you're having are then increased and intensified, deeper samadhis, like we saw Sri Ramakrishna having all the time. Sri Ramakrishna was the most unique spiritual figure in all our history because of all the different kinds of samadhis he was having. That's just one reason. And he left them behind in a current time for us to meditate on and see. Finally, it says here, the hidden nature of the alambanas gets revealed. Alambanas means pretty much just objects for meditation. So if you hear the word alambanic or alambana, it just means take everything for meditation. Take it all. Blade of grass, a tree. Take it all, see, as for meditation. And don't just take it all for granted. Because we've been doing that. In other words, one's conscious and one's unconscious. I was born, I'm a boy, I'm growing up, I have parents, I go to school, I have my money, I get married, I grow old, I die. All unconsciously. See? Without a shred of consciousness in it about who I am, where I came from, or what's going on here and what's going to happen to me after I die. Where other beings are sitting meditating on that, you see. They didn't just take a blade of grass and a tree to meditate on. They meditated on their deep sleep state last night. Then they meditated upon what's going to happen to them after their death. What bardo they're going to enter. Then they decided, I think I'll meditate back to the first appearance of consciousness in the crib. Then I think I'll meditate on my past lifetime, what happened to me after my last death, and where I went before I was reborn again. And so it's all a practice for meditation. It's all a practice to be conscious instead of unconscious. It's all a matter of realizing your inherent wisdom instead of being ignorant for lifetimes and never knowing. So that's Savitarka Samadhi in a nutshell. Now, if you take up the 6 avisheshas, you're talking about something that is a connection that Swami Vivekananda said we don't have in this day and age. Probably not even India is remembering it very well in general, its own teaching. That is, the masses of India. Some acharyas and teachers and so forth do. But you're talking about a word in Sanskrit that doesn't really have an equivalent tanmatra. I mean, it really pretty much means subtle elements. So the only way you can describe it is there are outer elements here, and then there are inner elements inside of you. And there are outer senses here, and there are inner senses inside of you. So the tanmatras represent these inner elements and these inner senses, or an inner realm, or the kingdoms of heaven within you. And the other thing that's missing to connect yourself to that is the 5 pranas. I already switched this over. It's these 5 pranas. What's causing you to taste, touch, hear, see, and smell. You see, you have that here, hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, and smelling, but you don't know why you're doing that. It's because the prana is making you do that. Man does not live by bread alone. So it's not food that's making you do that. It's the prana that's making you do everything, including this. But the prana is connected to my will, to my mind, that told me to do this. But without the prana, I could think all I want, and it would just be like an atrophied limb, you see. So these are all connections that we need to meditate on. Why am I breathing? Here's my in-breath. Oh, I'm conscious of it. Here's my out-breath. My held breath. Kumbhaka. Oh, here's my out-breath. Rechaka. Oh, here's another absence of breath. Another kumbhaka. I was just conscious for 10 seconds of my life, you see, about that which is animating my body, the prana. Or I can go on for 10 lifetimes and never be conscious of it. I could live 10 lifetimes and never once think about my breath. Howleys. We're sitting here in Hawaii. The breathless ones who came over. Probably because they were white-skinned. So they must not be breathing. They're turning white. So, but anyway, this presence of breath, sacred. Life, sacred. What's behind it? What's causing the breath? The lungs can't do it by themselves because there's a dead body and it's not doing anything. So you're bringing consciousness to bear on every little thing because consciousness is the only thing. There's nothing that transcends it, there's nothing before it, there's nothing that comes after it. That's God, that's Brahman, that's Allah. It's consciousness, awareness, if you want to put it that way, or pure conscious awareness. So if you were able to put some of these together, like links in a chain, you'd start to connect them to a subtle chain inside of you called these avisheshas. And these are alambhanas you want to meditate on too. So for instance, smell goes with odor, taste goes with flavor, and then light goes with tangibility, and visibility goes with seeing, and audibility goes with hearing. So these are the 5 tanmatras, and you haven't thought about it that way before, that there are subtle components to light, subtle components to air, subtle components to touch. You've just experienced them on the physical level, but you haven't thought about their origins. See? So you want to look into their origins because this is going to connect you to this deeper levels of your own consciousness. And this is the 7th limb, consciousness, meditation. See, now I've reached the land of consciousness, so I want to use that. And now I've been trained to meditate on every little thing. So I know what it all means, I know what a word means, I've connected it to the sound and the name and the object. All of this has been fused now in me, and it's beginning to give me a savichara samadhi, a samadhi about inner things, so that I don't even need to be out here anymore. I can just smile and look inside and I'm perfectly content. Who does that sound like? Well, any wise soul or yogi that you read about, or maybe you even saw one, but definitely Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, anyone that doesn't own a thing, doesn't covet a thing, and except maybe just a cloth around his waist, and he's just perfectly content and happy. Where is he looking? Where is he finding that happiness? All these connections inside have paved a road back to consciousness for him. And those are the roads to samadhi. And these are the samadhis. Nobody has ever mapped the samadhis like Patanjali did. There's too many of them really to do it effectively. But he did a great job, and these are the seated ones, and then there's an unseated one, which is asampragyata. It's awesome. See? Well, some of the facets then of meditating on these avisheshas, because the 6th one is your ego. So there's got to be a great connection here between audibility, visibility, tangibility, flavor, and odor, which are the subtle elements in hearing, tasting, touching, seeing, and smelling. The subtle components of those. So there's an answer to your question, why do I see, or how do I see, or how do I hear? It's not like, where do I see and what do I hear? But it's more like the subtle components to the very senses themselves, which will tell you where they marched out from, how they developed themselves, and also where their source is. So these things are more important to the seer, to the Indian yogi and so forth. These are more important. The other things are going to let go. The cost, the price, the fame. All those things, those are byproducts, get away, you see, get thee behind me. These are the things they're going to want to concentrate on, because these are connections back to Ananda, the bliss of consciousness absolute. So if you're going to meditate on these 6, then again, just like these, you would look for their nature and you'd look for their origin. And then you'll find out that if that happens, the mind becomes concentration itself. So we might as well just go to this limb of yoga here, you see, and just say, let's just erase the word concentration and say mind. The mind becomes concentration. It doesn't know anything other now. There's no lack of concentration in it. It's just got the idea. It returned to its natural state, if you will. It doesn't turn off anymore. It's always thinking higher thoughts, like a bird flying higher and higher in the sky, Sri Ramakrishna said. It may come to rest on a branch once in a while, but then it'll just fly and higher and higher again. So the natural state of mind is like a hot air balloon. That is original mind. But the ordinary mind is rainwater seeking to the lowest place. That's how Thakur Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa described the two kinds of mind, ordinary and original. So a hot air balloon is just, you don't have to say, will you please rise? You just strike the moorings, and there it goes. Will you please come back? No, I don't think so. It's more likely to say that to you. I'm gone forever. Love you is much better up here. You stay down there in the pollution of the ordinary mind. Expansion of the chitta awakens wisdom. So this is a good dynamic. It's that, the mind gets into a state of elation. Well, that's a cheap bliss to the yogi. And a lot of people get caught there. They say, oh, this is great. I've got elated mind. I think I've reached the goal. See? But basically, the expansion of wisdom hasn't happened yet. The occurrence of the origins of all these things were in wisdom, your wisdom. And when you become aware of it, then you can completely own it, as they say, or possess it. This is the one thing that is yours for all times. You don't really have to possess it. It was always yours. And all of this came out of that wisdom. The only thing you didn't know is that you initiated it. That's called mental projection. And then the second thing you don't know is that you can withdraw it. Projection and withdrawal on demand, you see. Or on command, if you might want to say. So expansion of your mind like that awakens wisdom. So wisdom was in there. Since your mind was so contracted, it didn't see it. See how beautiful that is? Due to the limitation of their own intellects, they did not see the Devatma Shaktim. I chanted my very first words this afternoon at the beginning of the class. So when my mind expands, when it contracted, I didn't see her. When it expands, I see her, Mother Wisdom. So I've got to find a way to keep that mind expanding, that hot air balloon going upwards and so forth, and rely back on the yamas and niyamas and on all these tools that I've been given, and particularly the connections that I'm making between them all. That's a beautiful bullet point there. It's that people can get high minds, kind of giddy, see, and elated, and then come down off that bliss. But they don't expand their wisdom. They don't come back with any wisdom. A person who comes back from wisdom, that's the person I want to go to, like I went to my guru. I'm sure he had high flights of mind because he was with Holy Mother, he was with Swami Shardananda, he was with Swami Brahmananda. Namaste, by the way, to Swami Atmastanandaji, who passed away yesterday, our president of our order. We'll wait to see who the next president will be, but Atmastananda, I met him. He was in his 90s, late 90s, 98 I think, passed away. So we envision him with his guru, Swami Vijnanananda, and then his Swami Virajananda, he was also with him, sixth president of the order. So anyway, these swamis have these connections back to these original beings, like my swami did. So they went into a high state of consciousness and they came back with something. It's called wisdom, dharma, jnanam. And the jnanam is connected to atma. See? This is a real difference than people who just have an experience and come back, get a little giddy-minded and say, oh, I saw some light. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell that funny story. Two men went into the temple of Jagannath. One goes in, comes out. The other goes in, comes out. One went in and saw the Lord of the universe in the image. The other went in and just saw a bunch of garbage in his mind. Sri Ramakrishna said. So one was heightened consciousness and one is not yet, still looking at images. I even hate to depart from that point. It's just so precious. But let's go on to the next one. The nature of the object or principle is known then. You know the nature of all things, and the ego begins to be brought under control because of that. It realizes it's been wandering in ignorance, and it's ashamed of itself, you might say. It sees now a much better bliss, not just giddiness or a little happiness or maybe even some temporary elation, but now it actually sees that there's some ananda, some real bliss behind it. And so it wants to start to turn toward that light and away from these outer glares that's been distracting it. Distraction and attraction. It's given up both of those. It's actually a good teaching. And then you might say it's ready for meditation on this subtle self. That's called the subtle ahamkara and the individual buddhi. These are higher stations than the visheshas and avisheshas, deeper stations, that is. And we're just pretty much following Kapil's 24 cosmic principles here from way, way back. And so, see how Patanjali took them and made them objects of meditation in a very real sense. And later on, some 500 years later, which is about the distance between avatars, Shankara came along and turned these very 24 into the non-self. He just pretty much brought the sword down on it. Yeah, you can use them as object for meditation. Before that, Kapila was using them to show the different elements of nature, manifested and unmanifested prakriti. But later on, when Shankara got a hold of these very things, and hundreds of years had passed, thousands of years, he just said, well, just look at all these, and this is your anatman. Your atman is only here. It's the witness of all the rest of this. Your true nature is formless, nameless, timeless, deathless, spaceless, beyond the elements, beyond the mind, beyond even God's mind. It doesn't have any form, linga. It's alinga. And then when you get to alinga, you'll get to unmanifested nature. You're going to have to go beyond that too to find your true self. So all of the unmanifested and the manifested exists inside of little old you, which is a more full and comprehensive way of saying it than most teachers say today. I am Atman, I am that, and they leave it at that. But did they know all the dynamics it took to have a realization like that? Did they know all the scriptures and study the svadhyaya and make all the connections and get rid of all the imperfections in order to have a full realization like that, like these great souls did? Or are they just saying something or mouthing something because it sounds good? It's true. Thou art that. But don't you want to confirm that for yourself? And if you haven't confirmed it, is that why you keep falling off of meditation and not getting to samadhi? Why the seventh limb isn't turned into the eighth yet? Maybe the seventh limb is turned back towards, I better go back and study my yamas again, because I'm feeling violent. I better go look at ahimsa again. So I'm just saying, as they say, you see, these connections need to be made deep and fast. There's Sananda Samadhi then. And this is the second class, and this is toward the very end of it. And after we'd looked at all these problems, limitations of the way, we also looked at all the solutions. We looked at the limbs of yoga, we looked at the yamas and niyamas, the observances and the practices. And now we've all of a sudden jumped to a samprakata samadhi, but we haven't, since it's indescribable, we're really talking about sixth, seventh limb when we look at something like this. Concentration must be there in order to have savitarka samadhi, in order to see things as God, You must have some kind of ongoing concentration. That you walk around your whole life just thinking about God all the time, like Sri Krishna did, like Swami Vivekananda did. So you're constantly at the task. You're on vigil. It's a good word. You're on vigil as to where consciousness is going to show itself in any little thing, under any rock or in any cranny. And anything that's getting in the way of consciousness, what am I going to do to deal with that, you see? Impositions of name and form and time and space over my essential self, my non-dual self. My self that's beyond the self and the non-self. So Sananda Samadhi takes up the subtle ego. Patanjali is making a good distinction between the individual self's sense of I-ness and the subtle self. And this is where I got my idea that Ahamkara, Purusha, and Atman all have their place. That's how I'm interpreting it. The Ahamkara is definitely the non-self. It's the deceitful self. It's the prideful self. It's the true non-self that's causing all the problem. But the Purusha is the true individual self, but it's not yet the Atman, see, if you want to look at it in that way. So Purusha is, in old times, there were too many Purushas running around. So that was, Vedanta had a problem with that, you see. Too many individual selves that really are real selves. You see, there can only be one real self. So, but by taking away this Purusha, you take away an important and lambanic stage, I think, you see. So you're going to need to include this individual buddhi and this, because it's so much attached to the higher intelligence buddhi, God's intelligence, jnana, and also the subtle amkara is also making its move towards ripening. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say there's apakvahamkara and pakvahamkara. There's the unripe ego and then there's a ripe ego. And he also said you can't get rid of the ego as long as you have a body. A sense of self will stick to you, but you just have to keep it at a minimum. So when you come down to a place where you're meditating on this, you're getting the bliss, the meditation on bliss itself. And you turn the corner away from the ego's preoccupation with any kind of imitation bliss. And now you're beginning to see the real thing. So there it says, you're meditating on the subtle ego and the individual buddhi. Sri Krishna has a quote that pertains to that. He says, having gained that which is considered the greatest gain, and wherein he is not shaken even by the heaviest affliction, let this bliss, which is the disconnection from exposure to all pain, be known by the name of yoga. Beautiful, beautiful sloka out of the Bhagavad Gita. He's defining yoga there in a very profound way. Next week I'll define yoga further for you. When you look at this chart that I've actually remade recently on what yoga really is. So that quote from Sri Krishna says, let this bliss, which is the disconnection from the experience of pain, be called by the name of yoga. That bliss is yoga. So you're beginning to have this samadhi of that bliss here. How does it manifest itself? You meditate upon the subtle ego and the individual buddhi. That bliss of Sananda is seen, must be seen in the same way these were seen. That is, you must look at the ego from the standpoint of origin, where it appeared in time, in your mind, and its various attributes. What are the attributes of that subtle ego as compared to the grosser ego you just departed from, the dearly departed or not so dearly departed. I'll give up that ego for this ego What are the characteristics of this new ego which are causing me to give up my attachment to the old ego and its preoccupations? It's a very important thing. Otherwise, people would still, and do still, attach to the immature ego and won't let it go because of its minor things that it likes, these little things that it's attached to. So what are the characteristics of that new ego you're taking on? Why does it make you feel freer, breathe easier, and think higher and deeper? And then you're ingratiating yourself to it, and it's revealing itself on deeper levels to you. Further, it's a fount of personal joy, and you must locate it and encounter it. Ego and senses are fully mastered at that point. Rajas and tamas are subdued. So he's almost giving you what the results of seeing it are here. That rajas and tamas begin to go away. And your senses and ego are mastered. Occult powers come as temptations, but the true yogi resists them. Patanjali, like any authentic great soul and seer, is keeping you steered clear of the 8 occult powers. They're called the Asta Bala Siddhis. Steer clear of them and resist those encroachments, because they'll come to you at this place because they come as temptations and they could set you off your path, and have for many a soul. So he's making this as a very important point. He wouldn't have brought it up otherwise. But if you can resist those, the sense of a separate I begins to reveal its limitations. So you're probably not going to stay, if you're making a quick climb of the tree of yoga with a thorough inspection and observation, you're probably not going to stay too long in the subtle ahamkara. You're going to see that it has also limitations that are keeping you from flying free. And then that, as we come towards the end of our class here, leads you to sasmita, samadhi. That's like the true self. You're getting even closer to the true self. And what you want to meditate upon there is God's mind, the universal buddhi, linga matra, the very essence of form. Linga means kind of form, and matra means this particle. It's the very essence of where all this came from, or the Mahat. Kapula's way of calling the cosmic mind. Hiranyagarbha, cosmic egg. There are different names for it. Lord Brahma would also be a nice name for it. So to meditate upon that is what we're going to pick up with next week, because if I get into it, I'm going to go over our limit of time for this class. So we'll pick up Sasmita Samadhi. In the meantime, you can go back and meditate on all these. Put these all together and look at them in a new way, as objects for meditation, or alambanas, because this is really what meditation really is becoming aware of everything. And I can end with that beautiful quote of Holy Mother when she said, "Does God exist only when eyes are open and cease to exist when they're closed?" So that's something to think about, almost a Zen koan in yoga and Vedanta, that with eyes open or closed, that one consciousness exists at all times, in all spaces, all pervasive. And in that way, then the yogi prepares himself, the yogini prepares herself for union. Yoga means union, and it's not a union that's to come in the future, or a disunion that I ever experienced in the past. I'm always in that, but now I have to realize that that's the case. This kind of system, 8-limbed yoga, is for that kind of realization, leading you back to your original true nature and its highest understanding, which is unimpeded, unalloyed, and uninterrupted. So here we'll end with a chant. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrinne Mahe Gatung Yagyaya Gatung Ye Nupataye Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manusebhyaha Or urdvam jagatu besajam samnoastu dipade samchatushpate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a sincere offering of the small self into the great self. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May peace be into the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.